We're going to continue talking about the Anaheim Ducks prospects and also some predictions to make for the prospects on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for over a decade, have contributed to Defend the Nest and also the public address voice for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, this summer, all customers get this. All customers will get a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is the dog days of summer, but you know what? That doesn't mean we don't have a lot to talk about, and we always have stuff to talk about, but I'm not going to be doing much of the talking in this first segment because here's what's on tap today. So we are going to be talking about the prospects once again. Actually, I won't be talking about the prospects. It will be Sebastian High from Locked On NHL Prospects that is going to specifically talk about the current prospect pool in the Ducks organization and not just the draft picks from the 2024 draft, but the overall prospects in the Ducks organization. So Sebastian's going to talk about that over the first segment. Second segment, I will have my thoughts on the overall prospect pool. Third segment, Sebastian is going to come back and give some projections, and I will give my predictions because I have some thoughts on what Sebastian has to say. So without further ado, let's throw it over to Sebastian High from Locked On NHL Prospects to talk about the overall prospects pool for the Anaheim Ducks.
Alrighty, let's delve into this prospect pool here in the second segment, and we're going to break this down by position. So we'll start off with the forward prospects that are very notable, followed by defense and then goaltending, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the areas of need in the prospect pool where Anaheim could still add, whether it be via trade or in the upcoming draft in 2025, as well as the overall grade for the prospect pool, which does not include the players currently already in the NHL. So no Mason McTavish or Leo Carlsson, but still including guys like Gauthier. Starting off here at forward, obviously Beckett Seneca, we just talked about him a bunch. He's a really valuable piece to add into the fold, likely going to be a dynamic top six winger long-term, adding some power elements and grit on top of that finesse and skill and combination of playmaking and goal scoring ability that he brings to the ice. But also Cutter Gauthier, who is likely going to be a full-time NHLer this season, following that trade from the Philadelphia Flyers and in that whole saga. But he's going to be a really interesting piece to add into the fold. He's going to bring a level of physicality and goal-scoring prowess that Anaheim quite clearly values, as they've shown in the past couple draft classes, whether it be adding Mason McTavish or Beckett Seneca. And I think that Gauthier fits really nicely into that team identity as a long-term top six, probably left winger, but potentially center. And that versatility is also going to help whenever injuries arise. But his goal scoring ability is a key area of strength. He's very smart in his off puck movements. And he's going to bring consistent top six impact for a really, really long time. Lucas Pettersson also deserves a mention here. As I mentioned, the speed, the two-way impact, the combination of puck handling and playmaking ability are all areas of strength in his game. Definitely still needs to work on the cycle offense a little bit and slowing things down on top of just speeding things up and learning to shift gears a little bit and be more deceptive in his attacks that way. But he could be a really nice middle six piece down the road. Nathan Gauthier is another really fun player, the 6'3", 207-pound right shot centerman who played in the AHL last season, logging 10 goals and 25 points. Will be looking to build off of that season this upcoming year as a power forward, like centerman with a real strong two-way impact. He could also be a long-term like 3C or 4C for the Ducks or even transition to the wing. He's quite versatile in his play in that sense. Beyond him, you have some raw skill in Yegor Sidorov, who was selected as an overager just over a year ago at the draft. From the WHL, really skilled, nifty puck handler, could really bring some offense in a middle six capacity. Same thing kind of along the lines of Niko Mijatovic, who has a bit less skill, but more of a power foundation, also WHL based. And he was a second round pick from last year's draft, who, again, a middle six projection would be the hope if you're an Anaheim Ducks fan with this player. Same can be said as well with Maxime Massé, who we just talked about. That combination of physicality and intensity and playmaking flashes and two-way impact is really quite interesting with Massé. But to delve into the defensive pool a little bit, we're getting into really interesting territory. Olin Zellweger, who already played just over 20 games in the NHL last season, but wasn't a full-time NHLer just yet, which qualifies him for this prospect pool. He's going to be fantastic in the NHL this season, one of the most dynamic and intelligent offensive defensemen who's able to blend elite level skill with elite level mobility so seamlessly, so intelligent as well, and being able to take space and time away from players in the defensive zone, leveraging that mobility to just suffocate players while defending the rush. And I think he's going to be a top four piece for a really long time there in Anaheim, potentially already as of this season. Beyond him, you have Stian Solberg, who brings that physicality and violence to the equation. And he could also be an NHLer in about 1 to 2 years. I wouldn't be shocked if he's one of the first players from the 2024 draft class to be playing consistent, reliable NHL minutes. Tristan Luneau will also be looking to be an impact player in the NHL this season already. He played 7 solid games in the NHL last year, but missed a lot of the year to injury, unfortunately. But we'll be looking to bounce back this upcoming season. And with him, it's the intelligence. It's being a very strong distributor of the puck, using his mobility and intelligence to take space away from opponents as well in the defensive zone. And his former QMJHL teammate, who's also in the Ducks organization, Noah Warren, brings a bit of a different style to the mix. He's also highly mobile, but he's physical, he's violent, he crushes opponents rather than just suffocate play. And while he needs a couple more seasons to develop, I'm very curious to see how he turns out. He might be one of the more entertaining number 4, number 5 defensemen in the NHL when all is said and done. Tyson Hines also brings that mobility and physicality combination to the mix. Anaheim loves drafting out of the QMJHL, especially for those big, mobile, intelligent defensemen. And Tyson Hines is certainly up that alley. He could also be an NHLer in the relatively short term for the Anaheim Ducks. And Terrence Smith, as we mentioned in the past segment, is another very interesting, mobile, skilled two-way defenseman with high-end offensive flashes. In terms of goaltenders in the pool, Lukas Dostal has obviously graduated at this point to the NHL, but Kalle Klang still remains in the system as a goaltender in San Diego with the Gulls. And he could still take a couple of steps to be a projected 1B type of NHL goaltender. And I'm curious to see how his development continues, because the raw tools and frame are really intriguing with that player. And I think that as a whole, if you take a step back and look at this prospect pool, it's strong, especially considering that a lot of the players that are in this group of young, talented pieces that are going to be part of the core long term are already in the NHL, whether it be Carlsson or Mintyukov or McTavish. The fact that the prospect pool remains this good without those pieces bodes very nicely for the development of the Anaheim Ducks. I think as a whole, I would give it the same grade as I gave the draft class, an A-. The raw prospect pool could use maybe 1 or 2 more elite level talents. But again, those players are already in the NHL, so not entirely fair to give it a poor grade. But an A- is still one of the stronger grades you're going to see given out in this series. And I think it certainly encapsulates what the system is. I think it still might need that elite level skill, maybe a top right shot defenseman. There's a lot of lefties in this system on the blue line, but you can always play one of them on their offside, and everything kind of falls into place if you do that. And maybe another like one or two potential top 6 forwards. You're going to see them go after that type of profile in the next draft, I'm sure. And I think it's a strong prospect pool with very few warts or holes in it. And they project very nicely as a potential contending group in the coming half decade.
All right, I have plenty of thoughts on what he just gave out there. So what we're going to do, we're going to head to the first intermission right now. Then I will have plenty of thoughts on the prospects pool for the Anaheim Ducks. After this brief intermission, stay locked in. And now a brief word from FanDuel. And folks, it's the dog days of summer, and I love sports, but I never want them to stop. And right now, the sports aren't quite sportsing the way I want. I mean, there was really not much sports. There was no sports in the Big Four, but you know what? FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. They have futures on FanDuel. They have World Series futures, if that tickles your fancy. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason Hernandez on this episode number 910 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. We're climbing up on the numbers. All right. So Sebastian just gave his thoughts on the overall prospects for the Anaheim Ducks. And coincidentally, I talked to Hadi about the prospect pool. So Hadi Kalikesh, myself, and Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils, we all went out. Actually, I met up with a lot of the Locked On hosts at the draft. So for those of you that I saw at the draft, y'all are awesome. And I plan to talk to as many of the crossover hosts as possible, because I got an email saying like, I love the crossovers, much more of those in the slow news cycle. Well, you know what? We are going to do that. In fact, I have a little bit of a plan for this summer. There's going to be at least a couple of crossovers with some Locked On hosts. One of those I had a meal with Trey Matthews, because who doesn't love a little bit of Ducks Devils banter? Because why not? And speaking of that dinner, so Hadi did talk about the prospects, and I mentioned that I was going to be going to the development camp the following week at the time. And when I got back, I messaged Hadi like, Cutter, he's the real deal. I mean, he really is. So I know that he's really high on the prospect pool. He's not going to be a prospect after this season. He's going to get a full season with the Anaheim Ducks. And it is a testament to Anaheim that they were able to, get this deal going. Yes, I know it was at the cost of fan favorite Jamie Drysdale. I know that's a big deal for a lot of fans. A couple in particular, Cecilia, I'm sorry, but losing Jamie Drysdale sucks. Getting Cutter Gauthier, what a deal. That might wind up being a good deal for the Ducks in the long term. Cutter Gauthier, I said it before, I'm going to say it again. He was the best player on the ice during development camp. And frankly, it probably wasn't close. It probably really wasn't. Cutter, I think, is going to project to be a bit of a brighter star than all the other prospects in the pool. Not combined, but I think he's going to edge out some of the other top prospects in the pool. He's going to edge out Olen Zellweger. He's going to edge out Beckett Seneca. I mean, I would love for those guys to prove me wrong and up their game, but as of right now, Cutter Gauthier is the real deal. Forwards, the Ducks prospect pool is completely set. Nathan Gauthier, I mean, so I like Gauthier. I think Sebastian and Hadi are a little bit higher on Gauthier than I am. That's primarily because they saw him play in person. And I mean, I've also seen him play in person with San Diego, and I like him a lot. I just don't like him as much, or I'm not as high on him as other players in the prospect pool, if that makes sense. Like, I still think he's a terrific player. He's a terrific skater, is going to score a lot of points for the Ducks organization. I think he could eventually crack the Ducks roster, but I don't see him being higher than a bottom six. That's no knock on his game. That's mainly because the Ducks are already so stacked in front of him that it's going to be hard for someone like Nathan Gauthier to overtake all those other guys. It's going to be hard for him to overtake Cutter Gauthier. It's going to be hard for him to overtake Beckett Seneca. It's going to be really hard for him to overtake someone like a Troy Terry or a Mason McTavish or insert other fantastic Ducks winger here. It's going to be very tough. That being said, I still love this prospect pool of forwards. They're fantastic. As far as the defensemen are concerned, Olen Zellweger really is the real deal. I'm very high on Olen. I'm much higher on him now than when he first started. Part of the reason for that is because of how he was brought up originally. So I didn't like what the Ducks organization was doing about 4 years ago when they brought him up slowly, but in a way that I think stunted his development, I think is the best term that I'm going to use here. He wasn't used correctly at first. He wasn't. When he went to San Diego as a Black Ace during the playoffs, he got very little playing time, very little opportunity. He looked good out there. In the one playoff game, he skated with the best of them. He looked fine in that Ontario versus San Diego series. They should have played him in that second game and didn't. I mean, yes, that's probably part of the reason why Joel Bouchard got the boot back then. But Zellweger just was not used properly. And then this year, I think Zellweger could have gotten a lot more time in Anaheim personally, because I think he's ready now. I've said that for a while. I just don't think the Ducks have handled him the best at first. I hope that picks up, and I hope he spends the full season in Anaheim, because he is that guy right now. So I actually expect Zellweger to play about 70 plus games for the Ducks this season. And if it's less than 60 games, then I would consider that a slight disappointment, not in Olen, but in the organization. So I'm really curious to see what he does. If there's one aspect I think the Ducks need to improve on as far as the prospect pool, it is goaltending. Dostal is no longer a prospect, all right? Let's get that out of the way. Dostal's graduated. He should be the number one goalie. I sincerely don't think John Gibson is going to last, not this year, but I don't think he's going to last past next season unless he's really serious about seeing this out. If he wants to stick around for the entirety of the rebuild, then he might want to stick around. But there might come a time where he wants to chase a cup, and he might just do that. So honestly, I cannot see a world where John Gibson sticks around past next season. So I expect him here the full year this year. I expect him in a Ducks uniform next season. Going into next season, he will have 1 year left on his contract. And I think more teams are going to be apt to bite with 1 year left on his contract. 2 years, that's still a bit of a term that teams are a little bit wary of. But 1 year left, I could see a team or two taking the bait and giving something really excellent for the Ducks in return. So I think it would be prudent for the Ducks to build up their goaltending pipeline starting this year during the trade deadline, or especially this next offseason and this next draft. The Ducks need to get a solid goaltender. Whoever is the best goaltender in next year's draft, the Ducks need to go after him. All right, we're going to head into the second intermission. Sebastian is going to come back and have his final thoughts, some projections, some predictions on the other side. And now, a brief word from Indeed. And folks, if you haven't used Indeed, then, why use anyone else? What are you waiting for? Because when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all, but to match with Indeed. And you know what? You could ditch the busy work, use Indeed to schedule, to screen, to message, so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So, join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go ahead to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And once again, you're locked in with Jason Hernandez, talking about prospects, and we're just going to do this right now. We're going to throw it back over to Sebastian High, one half of Locked On NHL Prospects, to talk about his projections for the young guns. Yeah, we'll get to that right now.
Alrighty, let's wrap up the show here with the final segment looking ahead to the upcoming season. I think that Anaheim will be aiming for a finish in the bottom 8 to bottom 16, so still missing out on the playoffs, but taking a significant step from third bottom in the league. These past 2 seasons, they've been around the basement, but they now have a lot of pieces to add into that NHL fold. Having a full healthy season of Tristan Luneau, as well as Olen Zellweger, as well as Pavel Mintyukov, really has reinvigorated that defensive core in Anaheim, and building up from the blue line at forward. There's so much to be excited for, whether it be Leo Carlsson taking a step, Mason McTavish taking a step, and his offseason workout routine is looking fantastic. He is looking absolutely shredded and ready for the NHL season to kick off in October. And you're even going to have some influx of talent there with Cutter Gauthier entering the mix. You might see Trevor Zegras traded still, and he might get an interesting return with another player that can plug in to that top 6 for the Anaheim Ducks. And I think there's a lot of skill and talent and intelligence in this young core for this team, and continuing to foster their chemistry on the power play as well as at even strength, I think is going to bode really nicely both for the future, but also for the development of this team within this next year. I think you're going to see them take a real step forward, and while contending for the playoffs might be a bit of a reach this year, you are going to see them play some better and more mature hockey than they were playing last year, with some added skill and dynamism as well, coming from all areas of that lineup. I'm looking forward to having a full season of Lucas Dostal in net there as well, continuing that trend of young players stepping up. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that chemistry builds, especially on that top power play unit. Obviously, you're going to have Frank Vatrano as a trigger man there, but you add in Leo Carlsson and make it in Mason McTavish, as well as Pavel Mintyukov. You could either add in a second defenseman with Olen Zellweger into that mix, or go forward with a guy like Cutter Gauthier. Or you could go with a different veteran presence as well. It could be Troy Terry in there. There's a lot of possibility on the power play, but I'm looking forward to seeing the type of chemistry continuing to be built on in this young core at that NHL level. And especially learning how to play on the puck, learning to be creative offensively and to really create things out of nothing with a bit more space and time on that man advantage, I think is going to be really exciting for this team. And really taking that next step is going to be very fun to watch, even as a neutral like partisan here towards the Anaheim Ducks. But let's wrap things up here with a couple of point projections for some of the young studs in this organization. And we'll focus on the guys that are going to likely be playing NHL minutes this season. Obviously, Leo Carlsson will hopefully get a full healthy season this year. And if he does, I'm hoping for something around the 20-goal, 50-point range for his development. He might even take a step beyond that, but especially if they just keep easing him into that NHL role on the second line, playing behind Mason McTavish in that center depth chart. I think that this type of production range would be fantastic. And if he's able to outshine that, even better. Pavel Mintyukov is going to get another season with big-time offensive minutes at even strength and on the power play, and I could see him scoring like 10 goals and 45 points. I think this is a fantastic offensive defenseman whose defensive impact also kind of goes unheralded at times. He's a fantastic player that I think has real number one defenseman upside at the end of the day. And when you add in Olin Zellweger to the mix as well as the other high-end young offensive defenseman in that organization who combines that elite level mobility and intelligence and skill, who could even also score 10 goals and 35 points this season, I think you have a fantastic left shot defensive core to build around in the short term. Like as of this season, I think they're going to be super electric, entertaining as anything, and also quite effective as far as a rookie or young NHL defenseman can go. And last but not least, I think Cutter Gauthier is going to hit the 20-goal milestone with the Ducks this season. Maybe another 20 assists added to that for 40 points, maybe eased into a middle six or second line role to start off with. But he's a really, really strong type of player, power forward elements. And I think he's going to add a much needed dimension as well to the wing for the Anaheim Ducks along that line.
Once again, big thank you to Sebastian High for giving his insight and expertise on this year's draft, but also the prospects and his projections. Okay, I gotta talk about these. I have to. So Sebastian made some very interesting projections. I plan on messaging him later this week. I plan on it, folks, and I plan on messaging Hadi as well, because these were interesting to me. So Leo Carlsson, 20 goals, 50 points. I think that's actually a fair one. Leo is going to get about 20 goals. I could see about the 21, 22 goal range. 50 points I could see because we've seen him on a line with Troy Terry and that line works. So he is going to get a lot of apples. 20 goals, that might be a little bit tough because of the line he's in, but 50 points I could see easily. And because Leo Carlsson is on the power play frequently, I think that's going to happen. Minty, 10 goals, 45 points. 10 goals, maybe. 45 points, maybe. Not a knock on Mintyukov, but also because of the way he's been used, he might not be on the first pairing. So we'll see about that one, but I could see Minty getting a close to 10 goals. I could see Minty getting about 35 to 40 points. Okay, I got to talk about this last one. Cutter Gauthier, 20 goals, 40 points. Are you kidding me? No, Cutter is he's going to break that. He is. He's going to be the engine that runs either the second or the third line, and he's going to probably wind up being the main goal scorer. And if he winds up on a line with Frank Vatrano, what's going to happen if Frank Vatrano gets traded at the trade deadline, and if, as Sebastian says, if the Ducks are in the bottom third of the standings, if they're in the bottom 8, then they're going to be sellers. And if they're going to be sellers, then what's going to happen? Frank Vatrano's going to get dealt. And if Frank Vatrano gets dealt, that line is going to open wide for Cutter Gauthier. So 20 goals, I think he's going to beat that. In fact, I think Cutter Gauthier, this is probably a very, very early bold prediction. 25 goals, 50 points. 25 and 50 for Cutter Gauthier. There's your bold prediction, folks. Yes, I'm really high on him right now. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I got a little heated there. Ugh. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for watching. Once again, thanks, Sebastian. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, among others. Ad-free on Amazon. We're also on SiriusXM. Ad-free on Amazon. YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it. Bing. There we go. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Anaheim Ducks. You could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. You could follow me on Twitter X for right now at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is always at LO_Ducks. And once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the night. Please remember to be safe out there. Be kind to one another. And Ducks fly together.